Hello all.
Hi.
Joe Palmer here, dialing in from Wiradjuri country in southern New South Wales at the thriving metropolis of the Rock. Very excited to have those of you that are joining us from all over the place. But very excited to have Lady of the Hour, Sue Middleton. Do you want to introduce yourself? Because I feel that you will do a far better job of introducing yourself than me doing so. I'll just say all the dirty laundry stuff if we do leave it to me. So,
I thought you might have started with here's who we all want to be when we grow up.
well, okay, I'll start again. This is Sue Middleton, who I've channeled for the last, I don't know, 10 years, my old girl energy.
I can't believe I've agreed to do this. This is clearly just going to be like the worst hour of my life.
I can't believe you let us use old girl energy when we're really there's not one generation between us. But anyway, let's.
Well, also, I was like, I don't want you to introduce us as Palmer United and Spice Rack. So,
Yeah, okay. I'd like to introduce my friends. Joe Palmer, otherwise known as Palmer United, and Julia Spicer, otherwise known as Spice Rack. And I'm Middo.
Middo. So as you may have gathered, Julia and Sue and I have met each other before multiple times. And I really am thrilled, Sue, that we cornered you. This has taken months to corner you into dialing in with us. But I don't want to, because I know you'll eye roll at me, but like I don't think I can articulate clearly enough the impact that you have had across rural Oz, across so many people's industries and so many individuals' careers, personal lives, all of these things. So I'm being serious now. I'm very genuinely stoked that we're getting to spend some time with you today because you are literally this fountain of awesomeness, of knowledge, experience, connection, and all of the things that we love and thrive to be at the connection table. So I thank you. And I would actually love you to introduce yourself because people generally do a better job of introducing themselves.
Okay, well, I'll do the really short version and channel my old girl energy because I have been around for a long time. You know, it's 3.5 decade long career working in regional and rural Australia. And I have been a lot of different things, but all of those different things actually amount to the fact that when I was age 22, I set this goal that I wanted to make rural Australia prosperous. So everything has been aligned around that purpose. I have been sitting on boards, and if I were to add up all of my boards, it's about 55 years of, if I put them, in a line and made them a linear thing. So deep board experience at every different level from local through to national. And I continue to move up and down the levels, trying to find the scale where I can make a difference. And I think the other thing, like because of my background in rural and regional, and I come from a farming background, and having met my husband who is a farmer, I became part of his family farming business. I've also had this really deep career in agriculture and have done a range of different things in ag. So I'm interested in the stuff that's at the nexus point between ag and regions, because that's where I find the really interesting things where I think the levers are for change. So the purpose is a prosperous rural Australia, and then the mechanism to get there is, boards, leadership, a career in agriculture, and a career in, I guess all of the other stuff that I do, which I kind of comes together under agdots, is the banner, which I formed with Lizzie Brennan, who people will know, from lots of different spaces as well, really big in the leadership space, and I think presented at Evoke last year as well, and was an MC at Evoke, so people will know Liz from there. So that's me, Joe. That took an incredibly long time. Sorry.
And that was
It's
the
hard.
short version.
And that was the short version. It's hard though when you get to the point where you have been around a long time and you've done a lot of things. I think sometimes I meet people and they know something about me, but I'll be like, oh God, that was like, 33 projects ago. And I've met you obviously through the Rural Women's Network. I've met um, Julia through kind of more rural community stuff and friends and mutual friends. But we kind of all come together and meet each other eventually. And I think the other thing to say is how much I really deeply treasure that network as well, because the girl gang in ag and the regions and rural communities is really strong and incredibly like it's an uplifting thing in our lives. So thank you to you two for what you're doing as well. Given you gave me a big blast at the beginning, I'm going to give you guys a big, woohoo for what you're doing as well.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind of you. I think you've articulated it beautifully where you come to it. Oh, speaking of girl gang, look at her. Just all conveniently nice and suntanned.
Is this Maz? Has Maz arrived?
Yeah, she has.
Hi, Dal.
Let's just get us all on speaker. Let's see what happens when we all get in the same room.
Terrifying.
Incorrect, Batman.
I think with being born and raised in Queensland and then ending up in Western Australia and but still having this national footprint, like you've got such an interesting career, like you've said, and the board career is something that I'm actually quite interested to sort of spend some time on today, because for a lot of the people that are part of the connection table and pondering what it looks like joining into this, a big focus, not our entire focus, but a big focus on that of the network is to create visibility for rural people and communities in decision-making rooms and having seats at decision-making tables. And you have been doing this for such a long time and doing it in quite visual positions and doing it in really sometimes, I was going to say problematic, but that's not the right word, in confronting situations. And so I want to sort of roll it back a little bit, if you could cast your mind back to sort of the early stage stuff of how you sort of landed in this world in the first place, as far as advocacy, board, those sorts of things. And then I'm sort of interested to talk then around what some of these more recent and more visual and more sort of challenging positions that you've found yourself in.
Look, and I think you get to the challenging ones after you've been through the fire, right? So you don't go straight into super contested roles. But for me, I started, my first board was and this was formed back in the John Howard days. So, a long time ago, the Regional Women's Advisory Council was the first one, and Kathy McGowan was my first chair. And so that was an enormously formative experience for me, because it helped me to really, I was kind of, I think, just this person who felt like I've got these really important views about my communities, and, had a 10 years experience in community development, knew how to develop a community, knew how to revitalise a community, and had just stepped up into a role in Western Australia of, learning how to do, that at scale. And so then went, okay, well, these people in government will be really interested in my views. And it's kind of quite a shock when you first, go to Canberra or, go to your major capital centre and you talk to the policymakers and the decision makers, and you realise that actually none of our views are being considered in that decision-making process. And so for me, I immediately recognised that, and this is basically my mantra about why I do boards, is a person like me who has the all of the opportunities to hear what's going on in both my industries and my communities, should be in that room. When they're making decisions about our places and our industries, someone should be in that room. So I don't have a particular way of targeting boards. I just target areas and spaces where I'm interested and think someone like me should be in that room. And that's really, honestly, Jo, the early days was about learning to hone my voice, learning to speak to the listening, learning to understand how you have to build like incredibly long-term, deep relationships, how you have to do that in a completely non-partisan way. So no colour, no support for any political party at any time. And then I guess over time, then learning to be quite courageous and learning to tackle tougher topics and harder things as you move on through those roles. I was, I guess, in some ways though, and it's not fortunate so much as because like you make your own luck. But that very, very first one, to explain how that very first one happened, I was at home with Ross River fever. I was working for the state government, doing a role, running a program called Community Builders. Someone from the federal government rang me and said, we're looking for women from WA. And I said, okay, here's some names. And I said, plus I want my name put forward as well. And she said, oh, well, we don't really want state government employees. And I said, okay, all right, well, then I'll resign. And then can I come? And she laughed and she just liked it. And I didn't resign and I got my position on my first board. And so I think that the other thing I've learned about all of this is to be bold around the things that if you think you should be there, be bold around getting into that room. And be putting yourself in the position where you know the people where you can say, hey, and I do this frequently, if a position ever came up around, like, e.g., I did regional telecommunications review a review ago and had always just said to the people in the department, if an opportunity ever came up, I just want you to know my name. I want my name in the mix. I may not get chosen, but I want my name in there. And so, Jo, that's really been a lot of what my career has been, with me saying, okay, I want to do something in that space. And then there's other things that come up where you get the phone call and you don't want to do the job, but you are the right person to do the job. And my example of that would be the live sheep export panel 2 years ago in Western Australia, where I was the only Western Australian, the only farmer, the only person who actually understood WA agriculture on a panel that was deciding the future of an industry. So, that was a phone call. When I got that phone call, I was like, no, don't do this. This is insane. This is just going to be shocking for our communities and shocking for our industry. And it's the wrong decision. Just don't do this. And then I got the second phone call and I went, oh God, you're actually going to do this, aren't you? And so that was the point at which I went, well, this is going to hurt so much and there's going to be such a big price to pay for this one, but I'm going to have to do it. So it's kind of like some of them, you go out there and you attract them to you, and other ones come to you because you're the right person, and they're not easy. They're contested spaces and they require a lot of courage. And I think, though, that if I look to my early ones versus my ones I do now, I've slowly moved up the scale of the contested level and the amount of conflict.
I want to just throw in a thank you, I'm sure, from the communities and producers in Western Australia for you taking that role. Like, it, for those who are not out in the sort of agriculture industry, who are more in our rural spaces, it's worth having a Google. But it I thank you, I think, on behalf of anyone involved in that industry. I think you have just articulated so beautifully why, like, I have just fangirled for so many years, is there is not one mention of feeling weird or do I belong here. There is no mention of that because that is not on your radar. And I think that that is why I was so keen to get you in front of people and to hear that explicitly, because you have proactively sought out to do this. And I think, taking it back a step again, the fact that you have got that personal vision and mission so clear in your mind, and that you've had it from such a young age, that it has been your North Star for every decision that you make, every client that you work with, every project that you take on, and every board or advisory panel that has sort of either come up for you or that you have actively pursued. I think if that is the gold nugget that anyone takes away from this call, is just how powerful that is, having that piece in there. I think I've got a question around the preparedness. Like, you were in a role early, you put yourself in there because you felt confident and you felt that that was a room that you needed to be in. Was there an element of like wild child Mido that's like, oh yeah, I'll just roll with this and I'll roll in and I'll learn and build that bike as I'm riding analogy with that? Or had you participated in capacity building opportunities or training or things like that? What did that look like?
Yeah, a bit of both, Joe, because of work and having that, background where I'm working with communities all the time, I felt confident that I could get my voice right. And I think that's important. Like if you're in that room, you're not speaking about something that you might just feel is personally important. You're speaking about stuff that you know deeply, so you're a subject matter expert is the reality. And it is hard to speak on behalf of the diversity that is Triple R Australia. And so when a person manages to capture that voice and has what I call a resonant voice, that's a person who should be in those rooms. So, but back to the thing of, do I build the bike as I'm riding it? 100%. I actually don't know that, whilst preparation's incredibly important, and making sure, as I said, the voice and, making sure you've really captured people's views and understand their views. But then after that, it is a matter of kind of jumping in the deep end to some extent, because you're going to think, and look, it's not that I don't have these times where I go, oh shit, is this, something that I can really do? Is this something where I'm going to really add value? But for me, the question will always be, can I have impact? So it isn't whether I'm ready, whether I'm going to be good enough, whether I have all the things I need to be there. I answer the question, can I have impact? And what do I need to do to make sure I've got all of the information, all of the data, all of the story to have impact? And then what I do is I do my prep around making sure that when I'm in that room, I have impact. And that is about being prepared for the meetings, doing all your background work, knowing how you're going to do the bits that you think where you can leverage a point in a meeting, or you can change the direction of how the decision's going to roll, where you can change the direction of what the money's going to look like for the communities, or how the co-design, like the process around, principles that you think important, e.g. co-design. The point where you can impact that, that's where you need to be prepared. And so I'm prepared around being the most impactful person I can be in the room, and but worrying about whether I'm going to be, whether I have enough confidence, and whether I'm going to go in there and, be able to, I guess, like have that really sense of strong enough self-esteem to be in that room. That doesn't bother me. It just bothers me if I don't have impact. The ones that I really, really have, where I would say, I have regrets and I have things where I go, I should have done that better, were about the times when I didn't optimize my impact and I missed opportunities. If I absolutely worked my butt off and still failed, I accept those ones. And I go, what did I learn from that? And that's really important for me because it does make me more powerful next time I get in the room. And look, the reality is these processes just go against you. And you can fight and you can build the networks. You can make sure all the voices are aligning. You can do all the right things in terms of, making sure you've got the optimal position in that room, but you can still lose. And they hurt, but the ones that I regret are the ones where I went, gee, there was an opportunity there and I didn't push it hard enough, or, I could have done a better job. And they're the ones that live with you. I don't regret the ones where I went, okay, everything that could have been done was done, and we still lost the argument. I regret the ones where I go, I should have done more. I should have been more. So that's how I beat myself up. I don't beat myself up about whether I should be in that room. I beat myself up about where I didn't have enough impact in the room.
So that's a really interesting piece. And I'm conscious that whilst the work that we do does not have a gender lens on it, it's often a group of women that end up on these calls. And I often wonder if we'd be talking about imposter syndrome or confidence or whatever if this was a room full of fellas. And I reckon we probably wouldn't. But that's my take on their conversations. So I do kind of think about that. I think your piece around impact is really important, because to go to a question that Maz has popped in the chat, this piece around, in some circumstances, the way in which we all do things, and we've got Leah's in banking, Joanna was telling us about the role that she plays with Nuffield, Alicia's just joined us, Lisa's on, we're all in positions, a lot of us, where we are trying to create influence and influence the impact that we're looking for, right? We're not necessarily selling a product. We are service, we are conversation, we are stuff, right? All of us on this call at the moment. And so this piece that Maz raises around trust is a really important one, and how we do that. How do you build trust with people? So the question started back when you were talking about the live sheep export work that you were doing, but how do you get people to trust you? And particularly when you're starting out. And I'm conscious, Maz, you're in a position where you can't unmute yourself, or maybe you can, but that's the essence of the question that Maz asked. So I just wondered if you might be able to talk to that. And then I want to get us to chat about some leadership stuff. And ladies also, feel free to unmute and ask a question. This is an informal chance for us to have a conversation. But so can I get you to talk to the trust piece first, please?
Yeah, look, I think it's actually really critical. It's a great question, Maz, because to earn people's trust and respect and to be credible, and if you want to get to what I would kind of consider the more senior levels, you do need to be highly trustworthy. So you need to be a person who's going to hold people's confidence and use information with discretion and in a way in which still gets the job done but respects everyone's role in the room as well. So I think there's, we could probably talk for hours about what underpins trust. But look, it's 100% about, I think, holding people's information and the stuff that they share with you that helps you to get the job done, holding that in confidence and then using that information. There are times, however, where you have to, what I would call, Julia, and I don't know if this is probably more later career stuff, there are times when you have to go a bit rogue as well too. So you actually earn people's trust by demonstrating that you'll be really courageous in situations where other people will go, like if we take that live sheep export one, it's a really good example. When people found out my name and found out that I was going to be on that panel, I cannot tell you the number of phone calls and, casual meetings I had where people went, you have just made the biggest mistake of your life. This is going to wreck your career. And I was like, how can doing the right thing by the industry in Western Australia and making sure that the right person is in that room, and I'm not the only person who could be in that room, but my commitment to their voices and making sure that they got heard in that process and that there was a good outcome in terms of the transition program. You have to know how to operate in the room and how to be able to do that. So coming back to the question about how do you get to, a point where people will trust you to be able to do that kind of a process. But you need to be able to demonstrate that you've got that capacity to work at that level. And I think being courageous also matters, because people respect you because you have taken on hard things, and you've taken on hard things but done them in a certain way which demonstrates that you've really held people's, views. And like, the way I think about it is I hold those stakeholders in my heart, and I work really hard to try and create the best outcome I can for them in that process, knowing that there's going to be trade-offs and that people are going to lose, and that there's, going to be things that you can't control as well, e.g. markets, will flip out of control when things like this happen. So yeah, Julia, it's a really good question about how you build that. It's built over time. People see you operate as well, and they see that you, I think also one of the key things with this is that over time you build relationships where you're probably trading information and you're making sure other people can get outcomes as well. And you have I think there's also a strong thing around the value prop as well, and understanding that for other people to work with you and work on an issue, that they also need to get what they have to get done as well. So understanding what in their world constitutes value, and then not just delivering on the set of stakeholder needs where you're holding them in your heart, but also that there's other stakeholders too, and making sure there's a value proposition for all the different stakeholders in the process. I don't know if Maz can jump off mute. She could actually answer that question, I reckon, better than I could.
No, Mido, this is your show, but I want you to also share your view on the capacity to listen in building trust.
Oh, yeah, true. Yeah, 100%. And that's like almost like step one, isn't it? Is that you really have to have the capacity to do the deep listening to people. So you're not just listening to the story, but you're listening to the emotion. And that's then, I think, then giving you the kind of the depth that you need in explaining impact and explaining why it matters to the group of stakeholders. And that's the bit, if you think about it in government terms, the bit that they can't do well, I'm just plugging my phone in before it goes flat on me. The bit that they can't do is really capture that kind of emotional dimension of what the stakeholders are feeling about a particular topic. But Maz, say some more about that.
Oh, no, because it's your show.
Okay.
Everybody.
I just want to listen to you.
Yeah, but
it's everybody who's here's show.
Yeah, it definitely starts. The listening is everything. And one of the great things about being in community development is you get trained to listen from a really young age. And so it's my thing about the resonant thing I talked about before is when I get to the stage where it's like you can almost hear because you've really absolutely captured them, and they go, yeah, you really get me, and they feel like they're really heard and that they're seen. And when you can capture that then in consultations and engagement processes, and then you then handhold almost that set of views to the government, that is a really powerful outcome.
Yeah.
I just had a question, sorry.
Go, Lisa, yeah.
I've probably reached a sweet spot in my working life where I'm not afraid to speak up anymore, and I feel like what I have to say is of value, and I become more and more unimpressed with the broader majority that sits around the tables that make comment and make decisions. And so when you get the good ones, you just want to unprofessionally hug them. But I'm just wondering whether there's an opportunity or whether there's some work being done that maybe we need to all understand so we can leverage it. But you see these young, early professional careers that come into, conferences and industry places, and they're so full of energy, and they are so well connected with their, what I call young farmers, and they really honestly believe they're entering those things equally. But I can already see with my skepticism and cynicism that they're already getting drafted at the drafting gate about, you know, who's going to stay and who's going to go and who's well connected enough. And I just wonder, is there an opportunity or a way we can bring some of those younger professionals along quicker, faster, earlier, and understand that they're going to have to do some hard things to get into really good places to say smart things later. And it's a conversation that came up with an ag accountant. She said, I just, you know, these women in ag, they're just not podiumed enough. And so, you know, we can still go to conferences where, you know, we could fill one table of 10 and that's it. And it's really disappointing that in many, many, many years that hasn't evolved enough. And there's some fantastic male advocates, I think, that I come across. There's so few. They're a bit like us. They're just so few. And I'm wondering whether there's a way we can leverage those people quicker, because they come in so sweet and innocent, just think that they've got, you know, an equal opportunity to contribute, but really they have to get down hard and fast and get to the tables really, really quickly to be able to have an impact before they almost get drafted off in that mid-career bit before they resurface again. And I'm not too sure whether that's just a cynicism or maybe I've just rolled around in the wrong groups and got scarred. But does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Can I just respond around what you would do? I think you help people to learn faster, Lisa, is the answer, but people have to go through the fire. So you don't want to take away the learning, but it's really important that people have the opportunity, I guess, to acknowledge and express and learn what's happened and understand it. And that level of self-awareness, encouraging that level of self-awareness is really important. And I think then it also just kind of externalizes it a little bit. And I'll give you just one quick example for me is that I have learned a lot about grief processes, which then helps me when I go into meetings and people yell. And as we all know, ag is really good at the kind of the angry yelling farmer. And so it's just, I think, really good if you can understand why things happening, then you can handle it better. And so what I think I would do with young people in your case is make sure that they're in a situation where they have that opportunity to do the self-learning, which is honestly coaching is the answer to that. People talk a lot about mentoring. I think mentoring is very useful, but I think coaching's better. And coaching is, however, it costs more, and so it's difficult to embed it into programs. But when you're doing leadership programs or anything that's helping to support, you know, young people to get into these positions, having as much resources as you can around self-reflection and learning, and then, you know, setting your goals and continuing to push onwards is really important. So if I were to give you all of my decades of experience wrapped up and you said what's the single most important thing that you have to be, I would say it's to be persistent. And so I still am fighting on some issues that I have been fighting on for my whole career, where I certainly thought that we would have solved it by now. And when I was in my 20s, I thought we'd solve these problems quickly. And now I'm in my late 50s. I'm like, okay, my job now is to make sure there's people after me who can continue to fight on these issues, because the fight will never end. So to have those young people, and I agree with you, Lisa, everyone's like, oh yeah, I'm going to get there because I'm good at what I do, for example. Well, just to let you know, merit's the bottom rung of the ladder, and it's a big, tall ladder, and you have to learn what the other rungs are, and you're only going to learn that from experience and from other people who have been up that ladder and fallen down that ladder and got up that ladder again and fallen down that ladder, and that's what matters.
So if I can, Lisa, respond to that a little bit from personal experience with Sue in my orbit, and I feel as far as being on the receiving end of, I guess, that coming in like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and things, I think something that, going on what you're saying, Sue, coaching in a formal sense, 100%, but I feel this network piece, and again, why Jules and I are here, why we're all here, that network and connection piece of being able to connect with, and even if it's just in the periphery, we don't all need to be in WhatsApp groups together with the people that you're wanting to be around or to be watching. I think that me being able to see, listen, be around the periphery of Sue for the last 10 years has absolutely, well, solidified and locked me in, but it has also shown me that the responsibility of sending the elevator back down the other way. So you're sort of asking how to do this. I think it is actively looking for the experience yourself, but then to constantly be looking back and bringing those young, snazzy people. And if you go to something and it's not being facilitated, a WhatsApp group is actually a fabulous thing. Chuck them in together, even if it's a once every 2 months message that someone's like, does someone know someone that can help me with this? That's how you bring them in. And I genuinely think it's networking, because the coaching, the mentoring, the formal training, all of those things comes out of it, but you've got to have even one phone number of someone that knows other people to be able to make those connections. And I think that is what's quite often the missing piece in there. My observations.
Yeah. And
Alex,
Joe, oh, sorry, someone spoke.
you go, Sue, and then I want to make sure Alicia's got a chance. She's got a question and a comment.
I was just going to say something that I don't do it as much now because I'm just not at conferences as much. But I used to go to conferences, and if someone on the stage inspired me, I would go ask for their phone number and ask them if they would be interested in, like, not so much mentoring, but just could I ring them a couple of times a year because I might have questions. And do you know, in my entire lifetime, only one person said no. Of all these people that, you know, I wanted to learn from. And the one person who said no said, I can't do this because I just won't have time, but my deputy is going to do it and I'm going to give you his number. And he was fantastic. And so I had so many mentors in my life that just came from me saying, I really like what that person said. I was inspired by it. I want to learn how they learned that. And that's how I've done heaps of my learning. And the network that you get from just going and introducing yourself to people who you go, wow, which is how I've met Joe. Joe and I just started talking at a conference, and Joe said, yeah, we should work together. And I said, yeah, we should totally work together. And, you know, that's how it goes, right? It's the Rural Women's Network sometimes comes after the first bit, but it's a great network because it puts us in the same rooms and we're listening to each other. And then we start to do that, as you said, Joe, sometimes just that informal thing of saying, hey, yeah, you've just fallen flat on your face. And I know that hurts, but something else better is coming. And all you have to do today is just sit up and have a look around you and look out at the horizon when you get an opportunity, because something is coming over the hill at you. And that is so important to know, because when you're in that stage of going, oh shit, that really was a monumental fuck up, that one. And then someone else comes along and goes, well, actually, it's not. And it's not even going to define your career. It's actually just a moment. And that's what we can do for each other.
Yeah. And I think LinkedIn is just gold for this as well. And I have shamelessly done what you do at a conference, and I've got global network from doing just that on LinkedIn.
Yeah, you're very good at this, Joe. You are the master at it. I mean, I think you should answer that question because you're the master. And Julia, I know, sorry, coming back to you, you had a point to make.
No, I want to make sure that Alicia's got a chance to ask a question. So Alicia, you're muted at the moment. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Just for the record, I'm Alicia.
Alicia, sorry, Alicia.
Yeah, that's
right.
okay.
Good work.
That's all right. I give people 3 chances normally.
I think I said it 4, so I'm glad you've done it.
I just want to make a quick comment of Lisa's when she was talking about the young people, because I'm having more and more contact again with young people, and I actually think they're actually really, like, I'm always like bedazzled by just how well they speak and communicate. Generally, I think, you know, that's so different to like my era where we used to be confident in the way we spoke to audiences. I think they've come along, like they're amazing at it. Where I think that they probably need, like with the generational difference to understand, is how much effort you have to put into relationships. So it's not just about, you know, saying the right stuff and, you know, being in the right places and being seen. It's actually about, you know, because of the text-only generation, you know, like it's actually picking up the phone and making contact with people and realising that that takes time, but it actually is a huge, like a good, really good long-term investment of your time to make some really good, solid relationships. So, yeah, that's just my experience, that they're a little bit too, I guess, quick to jump into the being seen and, you know, but, you know, actually establishing that really good connections right from the get-go, I think probably needs a bit of work. I just wanted to throw in there as well, because in this little closed group, it's a good place to do it. And, you know, most of you know me pretty well, then you know what I champion for, and that is diversifying. So I'm doing probably as much in rural health now as I have done in education, even though education has been the biggest part of my career. So if you've read the media in the last 2 days, there's been a flood on with all this new opportunity that we have here in Western Australia to really move the dial on a long-term shift in generating more interest in agriculture and helping to support our future workforce. It's been a really long, hard road for me personally, because all of the things that have led to kind of this opportunity are things that I just trailblazed and led because I think they needed to be done. I'm actually pretty exhausted from like a really long journey in it, but I'm so committed to it, so much so that I'm now working part-time, because that's all my grant fund allows me to work, to leave FRRR. So Sue knew me from FRRR, which I loved, to come back in and have another crack at this. I'm at a critical point at the moment, because really when my grant funding runs out at the end of the year, unless there is, like, people are supportive, people are like interested, people get what it's trying to do, but that conversion between that interest to actually funding, I just need some help there. I need some advice, because the previous attempt through government didn't work, and it was a short-term, you know, thing that came and went. This is actually investment for the really longer picture, so 20 years plus. How do we actually change that, convert that? Because I just can't see, like, there's never been a greater opportunity, and all the hard yards have been done in setting those foundations to get people to commit to that. And disappointingly, one of the agribusinesses that is, you know, a big agribusiness, rang me yesterday and said, thank you so much for the last 18 months of updating us all the time about what you're doing, and we're definitely interested, but we're having a bad season, so sorry, it's off the table. And it's about getting those agribusinesses to go, this workforce piece is not about you having a good and bad season and having money. It's about, like, what price are you going to put on developing your workforce? Because that...
Can I jump in? I'm going to jump in and ask if you can tell us ask us again what the question is, or what's the thing that you want us to discuss as a group. Can you give us that?
Sorry, you just broke up a bit. What did you say?
I'm trying to find out what the question is that you're asking, or what you're wanting people to be able to discuss. Does that make sense? Or have we lost Alicia now?
Breaking up. So my question is, it's all well and good to be influential and get people on board, and you've got a whole tribe of people that love your work and think you're doing great, but then at the core of that, there's one half-time person driving all that. How do we convert that and to actually getting some interest that is funded?
Great question.
Yes.
Okay, you got there. Who's got
I'm,
it?
I'm gonna I'm going to just have a quick crack at it, Julie, because I've just been involved at the, and this is an NFF project, but we've been involved in the monitoring and evaluation for a program called Ag Career Start, Alicia, and it's the only ongoing program that I've seen get funding over a period of time. And what they've really been able to achieve, I've just got to sing the praises of this program. Their workforce retention rate by industry sector has been really powerful and strong. And that's what industry wanted to see. And they were clear, like one of my jobs in this was to do interviews with all the sectors. And the sectors were like, if these young people aren't staying in ag, we still don't see a future in this. And I was like, tough, because these are like 18 to 24-year-olds. And you know what young people are like at that stage? They're still figuring out who they want to be in life. And, they're jumping around between things to try out different stuff. But the retention rate in that program has been extremely high. And so that's been a bit of a breakthrough that I have seen. I don't necessarily know that that means it's going to have a 10 or a 20-year horizon, but it has industry support, and therefore the government has bought into it. And the thing it probably has to, be able to crack is that, as you know, the state funds a lot of the kind of traineeships and that, other level of support for young people, and trying to bring all that together and create something where all of those pieces of the puzzle talk to each other seems to be, I guess, the future challenge. But yeah, it's been a success, and retention rate's been the really important value proposition.
Can I get you, Stu, to have a bit of a talk around, though, that what I think, like Alicia, I feel your pain, but I think what happens so often is that at a really individual level, it's really hard to get ongoing things. But how do you bring a project with other people with those common things? Because that makes it easier for people to get around. Like, I think, like, rather than trying to spearhead an individual program that might be quite geographically specific or something, can you talk about where you've seen like partnerships work when it comes to an advocacy sort of play?
Jo, do you want me to answer that one?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay, cool. It's good. It's good I was listening. Yeah, so partnerships work in advocacy work where there's a strong value proposition for the partner, and partners are very transactional. So if you're talking sponsorship, highly transactional, partners will be a little bit more long-term, but they still want to see the outcomes, and you need to be able to demonstrate that you've achieved the outcomes. And the answer to that is data. And that's why we work in the space. As you know, Jo, I'm a techno gnome, but I recognise that everyone needs to have really extremely to the greatest level you can afford level of sophistication around your data, because your data tells your story. And everyone at the end of the day, it's my example of retention rate. If the program doesn't know what it's been able to achieve in terms of young people staying in an industry, then it's hard to get that level of buy-in from partners, because partners want to see a result, that is more immediate. Government will take a more longer term position with things, and it will fund things over a longer period of time. And I find there's always a difference between the state and the feds as well. The state have kind of an area of remit that they're in, but the feds will do more long-term exploratory type of funding. But they still want to see industry buy-in, which I think is fair enough, because they're using public funds to do something. So what's the answer for partners? Being able to demonstrate that they have value that they are looking, to pay for, and demonstrating that you're able to get your program to meet their value proposition, and that you can do that over time. And then people will give you money for things. And I think it's like, yeah, that's history of success. I agree with what Julia just said, that people want to be involved with things that work as well. So sometimes when you're doing early pilot programs, you actually have quite a lot of failure going on, because that's when you're doing all your learning as well. So it's also being able to capture the learning and be able to demonstrate to government that you can manage the risk in the programs while you're doing something that is new.
So I'm conscious of our time, and I just want to shift the conversation a little bit towards the end. You had a conversation with us around impact, and that's really your, am I creating it? Am I doing it? Have I changed it? Have I, when you were speaking earlier around what gets you to the table. One of the things I find really challenging, and I'd love your take on it, is around language, actually. And I'm a really annoying person around the table because somebody will say, collaborate. And I'm like, what does that mean to you? Because again, and maybe Alicia, to some of the conversations you're having, I get asked all the time, we want to do some consultation. And when they've spoken about it, I'm like, what you've just described is not consultation. What you've described is finding a nice, positive way to go and tell a whole lot of people what you already want to do. I don't read the dictionary every day, but that, my friend, is not how I would define consultation. And so I am really that person in the room. You talk about going rogue. I am that person where I'm like, what does that mean? What does that look like? And so again, for this group, we all play all over the place. I guess I'm keen for your thoughts around, or any experience you've had around really challenging people to get clarity around what it is they actually think they are asking for, as opposed to what the actual need is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Like, this is such a live conversation on a daily basis, Julia. So we use frameworks. And like that one where you just talked about, you just outlined the IAP to, consultation spectrum, which is you put that in front of people and you say, okay, so you'll say you're consulting, but actually what you're doing is informing. And this is a power spectrum. And so I'm a person who's looking for the maximum amount of power for the community. And the government typically is looking to manage its risks around a change process. And so it's looking to involve or to share the least amount of power. And so you've got to come to some kind of an understanding about what is the level of decision making that you're going to allow the participants in that process to have. And if it is none, then you say it's none at the start, and you be honest and upfront about that. So my answer to your question is frameworks are critical for us, particularly when people come to me and say, I've got this idea and I want to, kind of progress it. I'll give you a framework, because a framework helps you to put your ideas in place and helps you to understand ways of solving a problem. The other thing about this is that someone else has already solved this in the world. We don't need to start from scratch. There are thousands and thousands of tools that you can use to do any of the processes, what I talked about today, value propositioning, for example, that comes from, and I'm not going to remember it now off the top of my head, but a really well-known European process that I've used for years and years and years. Does anyone know? I'm just looking to see if I've got it actually on my shelf. Anyway, then and these tools help you to, I think, capture kind of intent, and then you can then take it to, e.g., if it's the government that's making this decision, you can take it to the government and say, okay, this is what we want in terms of a process. What are you prepared to do? And that bit is then the negotiation bit. And so I will tell you genuinely, every room I sit in, the goal is to lessen the decision-making capacity of all the participants. My goal is to expand it.
Yeah.
And so I have to work in that space, and like, Alicia raised the FRRR board, which I'm a part of, and it's a really good example, because we do work a lot with government, and then we work with funders, and then we work with donors, and then we work with people who want to do good things for communities, and we're like the translation space in between. But one of the really interesting challenges we have is lining up the giving the kind of the side where people go, okay, oh, I've got some money that I can, give to a cause, or, something good I want to make happen. And then we translate that into action on ground. And then that translation piece is where people like yourself come to the fore, because you're so critical around designing programs and processes that help to make sure power is shared. And it's just not a small, that's like my entire lifetime of work, is that piece in between, entire lifetime. And Julia, I thought that it's weird. Like, I've been doing this now for 35 plus years. I actually now still see issues where I go, shit, I was doing that 35 years ago. And I love, to the point about young people, I love seeing young people in the room, because I think, great, these are people who are like me when I was 22 years old, really wanting to live their passion and have their work and their life's purpose line up with their passion. And there's nothing I like more than seeing that in the room, because I genuinely just feel an enormous amount of hope for the future, because I think young people today, there's lots of conversations about different generations, but young people today just really inspire me around their real desire to live their values. And I look at lots of young people and think, God, I wish I know that it sounds like I was young when I figured out my life's purpose, but I still didn't actually figure out how to align my values with my purpose straight away. It took me years to learn how to do that, and a whole lot of stuff ups along the way. So, I think that, to your point, how do we make sure that we can do this, is we just have to, back to the start of this conversation, keep getting back in that room and keep explaining how this can be done.
Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful place for us to pull up. An hour goes quickly when there's so much that we could be talking about. I think that the rooms that we are all in, and Sue as our guest for today, the rooms that you are in are better for it. So I really want to thank you for spending this hour with us. I think it's a great chance to reflect on what is it that we all want to be doing when we're in these rooms. To Sue's piece around impact, I ask annoying questions constantly, but that piece around going rogue, I mean, to be honest, there's a few rooms where I've been invited into for exactly that reason. That's the job that they have given me around the table, and I am very happy to do that. Always in the spirit of achieving and progressing and getting an outcome. But the rogue piece is actually not a bad one for a few of us to step into as something around the table. Sue, thank you so much for joining us. We've got a good Western Australia contingent. We're international today. Thanks, Maz. And Joanna, have fun next with your Nuffield crew soon, and look forward to seeing you all at another brunch in the future. I'm going to hit stop recording.
Thanks, Sue, and thanks, Julia. Nice to meet you.